Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show ahead of this weekend's game with Plymouth Argyle. I will attest that we are recording just hours before our game against Derby County, so if you're listening to this after a poor result, I really hope it perks you up. And if we have won due to a hat-trick of Wilson Isidore penalties, let me be the first to say I've got my Sunderland back. Oh, I'm so happy. Joining me, as always, is a man who very much views the world through the same prism as myself, but he does support a team that wears green and white as opposed to red and white. It's Ben from the Green and White podcast. Ben, you don't have purple lips. For the people who don't understand that, you never will. How are you, mate? You all right?
Yeah, no purple lips, but there's still the strange, weird background going on, which I can't get rid of. So half the gag's still alive and kicking. Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Other than having to talk about football, so I hate you for dragging me into this half hour of my life. But always a pleasure to talk to you, and I couldn't turn the opportunity down.
You deleted Twitter and I panicked. Where was Ben?
Oh, it's just got to I just my mental
Yeah,
health's up and down as it is, so I didn't need the random intrusions into my life.
I get no abuse whatsoever on social media. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had it in my life.
Well, I can always start on Blue Sky. Do you know what I mean? If you now you mention it, mate, it's happy to help.
I'm running out of mugs. I'm running out of mugs.
The in jokes that, yeah.
So many. Football, yes, that's what we're talking about. Look, as I said before, we are speaking before our midweek game. So, well, let's talk about your last result, which was not great. Look, from the outside looking in, which is a phrase of mine now. 1-0 to QPR doesn't look great. How was the performance?
It was a weird one because the manager tried to implement a little of his style, which we weren't aware of 2 weeks ago. So I don't expect anyone else to be aware of. But it's a very high intensity, high press, almost rugby-esque, territory-based rather than possession-based football. I'd like to say. No one else has described it that way, but to me, it seems very much get the ball up the pitch, try and get the first ball or the second ball, and if we don't get the first ball or second ball, harry the opponents into giving the ball up as quickly as possible. And that also requires, of course, that you drop back quickly. If after the first sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds of pressing, you've not got the ball and that the team and the opposition has sort of set themselves up, you then need to drop back into position and then sort of drop your block further back. So it's quite a physical and intense form of football. And Cercle Brugge, his previous team, were noted for being the most physical of all the physical metrics, like the distance covered, etc., etc. The most physical team in the Pro League whilst he was there. So he tried implementing a little bit of that, I think, in his what's technically probably his first game that he had full control over. I think he sort of deferred a little bit in his first game, having had one session on the grass with the team to Kevin Nanscoville. To sort of maybe sprinkled a few of his ideas in the very first game he was here. But so QPR was really his first game. I'd imagine he was trying to put his fingerprints on what we were doing to some degree. And it didn't go well for a number of reasons. One, QPR are a lot bigger than us. We are exceptionally small for a championship team, and therefore playing a first ball, second ball kind of intense, pressing, combative style is not really in our wheelhouse. We also don't really have that many athletes, regardless of size. Adam Randall, for his size, jumps very well, is very strong. Darko JB in the middle of the park is a real specimen, but outside of that, when one of those needs a rest, we don't really have an alternative coming off the bench in midfield, and they are obviously not going to be able to play 90 minutes of that style week in, week out. We were forced to go to a back four, which isn't his preferred setup. Back three would be because of injuries and having sold Lewis Gibson, our best centre back, to Preston for his buyout clause of something like 1.5 million. And then in that game, Brendan Galloway, our decent left-sided centre-back, is got injured and is now out for the season, so we'll likely be a back four again. We don't have full-backs, we have wing-backs. We have an abundance of wing-backs and not full-backs, so that didn't really... Barley Mumba was at fault for the goal, though not directly. He was at fault for the passage of play leading to the goal, despite having to play on the wrong side effectively and as a fullback rather than a wing-back. So he is handicapped being put there. I just wish he could get a run at left wing back, really, rather than left forward or left back or right wing back or wherever he's asked to play. And we brought in a new player, Timoteus Puhac, to play left wing back, who was asked to play left full back. And I don't think he's as strong defensively as he is going forward from what we've seen of him in the two games he's played. How did it go? It was an absolute hodgepodge of people playing in positions they're not familiar with a new style of play, which not only doesn't suit them, but the players aren't familiar with either. And it went about as well as it sounds. I just don't think we've got the personnel to play this style. He's not stupid and knows that, and has said he's got sort of like a plan to keep us up and then go again in the summer, hopefully with a bit more recruitment. But it's almost like the exact opposite of what Rooney was trying to do. We've had four different management teams in the past 12 months who've all had different formation and tactical choices, and we've also recruited for them semi preferentially. So tried, I think, to sort of bring in stuff for Ian Foster after having sort of like a Steven Schumacher style again for Wayne Rooney to a degree, and now we're going to have to try, it seems, in January to bring in something completely against the profile we've been looking for to this point to try and give Muslic some tools to work with.
You're speaking about that, the manager, and he was linked to us in the summer. He was one of the
Really?
many names that was linked. So, like, we knew a little bit, and I suppose I had the luck of knowing a little bit more about him because he played against Kilmarnock with Cercle Bruges at the start of the season. So I've seen a little bit, but I'm not going to say I know much about him. But one thing that did end up being a big thing, Ben, is his speech on social media. Now, look, I'm like, some people loved it. There was actually an argument in our group chat about it. Like, one said, "Oh my God, I don't even support Plymouth, and I'm going to run through walls for Plymouth Argyle now." And I went, he's just foreign and David Brent. A foreign David Brent, sorry, not foreign and David Brent. He was a foreign David Brent. And there's two different ways you can take it. Like, if I see that from most managers and it's filmed, I'm not going to lie to you. I go, right, why is it being filmed? Like, shut up, do it behind closed doors. But some people will absolutely love it. Where did you stand on this whole, what was it? What would you call it? Speech?
Oh, look at me. I'm a journalist and I watch international competitions for work, and I've seen him play before. Um,
Pathetic.
just dropping it into my live streams just casually. What did I think of it? I just I spoke to Joe on Turfcast, who was very impressed with your mob, even more so with the draw than he was when you beat them. I think he's a
I
bit
like
scared.
Joe. I
He's
like
a bit
Joe.
scared. Can I just shock you? I quite like Joe.
I quite like Joe.
Um, but well, where was I going? Oh, talking about that speech. Yeah, I said to him, he's very charismatic, and the way he delivers it is impeccable. You know, he's got an aura. He has the command of a room. But what he says is very much what any manager should be saying, and normally does say when they go into when you strip it down to the actual, what he's saying. It's I'll give you everything, you give me everything. I'll respect you as human beings, but I'll be harsh when I need to be. You give 110%, and we can and that's what every manager says, isn't it, when they come into a new squad. So yeah, I as much as I was impressed by his delivery, which it was, he obviously has charisma, the actual content was like I very much said the same thing. Well, that's what every manager says when they come into I wouldn't necessarily call it Brent-esque or Brentian or whatever you want to put it, but it was very much the same old, not hackneyed, but it was the same sort of stereotypical sort of management speech. So, I mean, hopefully people buy into his personality. I don't think there was anything in the content of what he said that was special at all. It was that, what you expect the very basic. And I think maybe that was because it was being recorded. I think he made it more about the performance than about, because are you going to go into sort of tactical? Are you going to start being direct about, I think it was a performative piece really, rather than I think he'd probably, hopefully at least, have gone into a little bit more. I don't mean detail in the sense of start talking about tactics and stuff, but sort of really, what I see the issues are here, what I believe we can sort of do on a more fundamental level, rather than sort of glossing over the surface there of like, yeah, we'll just try hard and then it'll be good. Yeah, top. Nance, you take over, which was basically kind of what it was to be. And
It was the bit when he said, "Nance, you take over." My head went, "Go get a guitar."
yeah, you got a lad coming in to do the hacker tomorrow. You'll love it. It's inspirational. It was yeah, I don't mind him talking the talk as long as he can walk the
Mm.
walk. Because to be fair, Wayne Rooney said a lot of the right things. He had more aims, and but it was good. He talks well about football, but that didn't count for anything really ultimately. So yeah, we'll see. The proof will be in the proverbial pudding.
We spoke earlier in the season, and like I was like, okay, so Wayne Rooney tried to hold my laugh in, said it was going to fail. You kind of clung on to the very last. You were like 4 games in, and you already had your fingers on the ledge, and they were like kind of coming away. But you were saying, if you can just get a result, you never know. But I could feel you going, oh God, this is going to go horrible. And 15 games in, he's going to be sacked. It wasn't that far away. That hope that you had waned away. No, pun intended. I'm a journalist, so maybe it was. But when did it go wrong for him?
Oh, you didn't mention that.
I said it twice now. I mean, it felt like it went wrong as soon as he was appointed, but
Yeah, look, Wayne Rooney is Wayne Rooney. I can't blame the guy for applying for the job, but he's clearly limited in what his inability as a coach, as you've just sort of suggested. So it's not his fault. He's got limitations. He applied or was offered and took it, and it's on the board. It's weird because, like you say, it did kind of go wrong immediately, but we had this kind of purple patch where we played well against. I'm trying to think, we beat you, didn't we? I think it was a pretty 50-50 game. It wasn't like a fluky win. You could have argued you could have won it 3-2 and it would have been fair, or draw would have been all right. You dominated, I think, the important parts of it, but it was a bit of a ding dong game. It wasn't one where I think you wrested control of the game. Beat Blackburn at home, that was probably our best performance. Even then, we needed a late goal to do it. Beat Luton at home, and that's looking less impressive by the week. So there's this little period, sort of not long after we talked, or around the time we talked, where it's just like, well, do you know what? Actually, there might be something here, and that was just a false dawn. I think that was just that period where people are trying to buy in. The squad is trying to buy in, giving him time, trying to sort of get things put into place, his tactics on the pitch, whilst also maybe taking a bit of ownership before the batterings start accumulating. And once you sort of get beat by four or more, 3 or 4 times, all of a sudden I think you start to lose hope. And then he's calling players out publicly and again, and it's a death spiral by that point. So I think, yeah, it was pretty quick, but the club, I think, were really hopeful it would last out, probably for economic reasons more than anything else. And I don't really want to get into that because we haven't got time, and I'm depressed enough and miserable enough about Argyle as it is. But I wrote a long read on it for the Argyle Life website after his appointment, and the chairman came out and gave a defence of their appointment of Rooney and sort of said, well, there's this and there's that. And I sort of did a breakdown of, one, his analysis, and two, Rooney's previous record, to sort of say, actually, this is all guff. He sort of said things like, well, Rooney was required to play a certain way at Birmingham, and that explains it. But actually, Rooney himself had come out and said, I was completely aligned with the owner's ideas, and it was my style of play, and I chose it. And my biggest regret is that I didn't have a window to bring players in to implement my style better. So there was no forced about it. It's what he sold to Birmingham's board and what he chose to implement. So all this kind of stuff, which I sort of broke down and said, like, this is the reason it's not going to work. Like, Rooney's Birmingham scored 1 goal a game and conceded 2. Before him, obviously Eustace before, but even after, the variety of caretakers and managers afterwards managed to score 1.2 goals per game and concede like just more than 1 or something like 1. But so both before and after, it was considerably better. If you look at the points per game and the goal difference projections, both after as well as before, much, much better than Rooney's tenure. And it's exactly the same thing that transpired at Argyle. We conceded a lot more than we scored. Yeah, it was just, I think it's easy with hindsight and to say doomed, because there was a period where I was saying, well, like you said, I was like, yeah, this might be all right. I mean, there's results coming, who knows? Because you never do know. But, where you'd have put your money to begin with, and that was obviously the sensible bet. It came to pass as was expected.
yeah, it was no real shock. But this is just a devil's advocate thing, and this is talking as a person who's watched Plymouth, I think, twice this season, including our game, so I can't go in depth on it too much. But when you look through Plymouth's squad, there's some decent players there, and you're not adrift at the bottom of the league, but like there's 3 or 4 points, I think, between yourselves and Luton. Hilariously, by the way, what are Luton doing down there? But the argument sometimes is that the players need to take a fair share of the blame. Now, I'm just picking players out the hat here that I rate quite highly. Whittaker's the obvious one. I think Ryan Hardy's a really good centre forward, but they don't seem to be having the season that they had last year. In fact, Ryan Hardy's kind of barely scored this season. I'm not asking you to dig players out and do a Wayne Rooney here, but are the players to blame at all, or does it lie on the mismanagement and stuff from the top being a bit skewer?
Well, to be fair, in our first season back, we were scoring far above our XG, and I think sometimes even above our XG on target. So we were maybe having a few flappy keepers and just some absolute howitzers. Finn Azaz helped with that, not just in opening up play and creating room for Whittaker, because Whittaker can hit the top target, but he needs the space to be able to do it. So you had like players like Azaz being able to give him the space to run into and unleash a howitzer. But if he's double marked all the time because everyone knows we've got no threat anywhere else, either in the middle or the other side, then it's hard for him to create the space. We only got the chance versus Brentford if you watch the highlights of the FA Cup, because Johan Visser just decided, well, I've tracked back, I'm just going to stand here and let him run around me, and then he had the space. Otherwise, the decent defender doesn't get that opportunity. So, I mean, it is a well. I think time will tell how much the players are to blame, because those players all functioned pretty well last season. Those that were here in different systems. But like I said, we've recruited players really badly. We've recruited players as a hodgepodge. They might be good players in a vacuum or in out of context, but do they fit the squad we've got? We've got an abundance of wing backs and no full backs. We've got centre backs that are sort of more suited to playing in some more suited to playing in a three, and some better playing in a pair. Our midfield sort of seems to be full of technical midfielders. Plus, we're asking Adam Randall to be the workhorse. He's the only genuine box-to-box midfielder, or at least midfielder who could probably play more advanced, or six or the eight. Then you got Darko J being loan from Leeds, who is a prospect, but it can be up and down. And I think his confidence is suffering because he's been in this team that's been taking an absolute tonking. So he could probably do with a bit of a rest and sort of get his head straight. We're playing Caleb Roberts, the academy graduate. At times he's a good player, but again, do you want to destroy him by throwing him into the midfield? We've got players who just, when you look at the units on the pitch, they're not whole in and of themselves. The kind of like the back end could do with playing a different way to the front end. You can't really sort of make a formation out of the squad we've got, and we've got a few injuries. But like you say, Ryan Hardy's not scored in 34 games, and league games anyway, and it's like, how much is down to him when he was, he scored well into double figures last season, and how much of that is confidence that, I mean, you can see how disappointed and despondent he was on Saturday against QPR, and he got some ironic cheers when he went off, but we're chipping like little lofted balls into him, not stuff for him to run onto or high balls he can compete with, expecting him to get up in the air to compete with it, and he's not the biggest. That's just not his game. So I don't think Hardy's good at, he's limited in what he can do, but he's good at what he does do, even at this level. But we're not set up to play that way, to his strengths. So yes, maybe some of the players could be doing better, but I think they outperformed themselves, a lot of them last season, and now they're maybe underperforming. And I think sometimes that's not down to commitment or effort or anything else. Sometimes that's just down to stuff goes that way sometimes, and you outperform your XG, and other times it goes the other way. Morgan Whittaker can be called a genius or lazy by fans, depending on whether the shot drops 6 inches one side of the post or the other. And fans can be so reductive about things that the nuance is lost. So I know it's a boring answer, but yeah, probably the players are to blame for a little, but also maybe they did themselves a disservice by playing so well last season and being the beneficiaries of a great run of luck and just wonderful finishing and fluky performances we came out the right side of too. And now we're kind of expecting the same over performance, and that's just not reasonable. But there are some good players in the squad, as you say, and I feel like confidence has taken an absolute hammering. The spine of the team is a bit weak, and I'd say maybe even psychologically, even players like Adam Randall, who leaders of the team, although he's young as a Plymouth boy, the Argyle graduate, expect him maybe to be a bit more vocal than he is. We've lost Gibson, who was a voice at the back, but even towards the end of his tenure, I think he knew he was off. He'd had enough. He was tired of being the one shouting, organising, and then Stilkins getting pumped by 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 goals, and his head sort of dropped a little bit. So I feel like, we sold Dan Scarr, who was a very vocal, combative centre-back, to Wrexham, and he hasn't played. I'd take him back in a heartbeat, just to have someone who'd go and head the ball, the proverbial brick, that he'd head back and go and G the team up, grab people by the bootstraps. I feel like leadership is maybe what's lacking rather than heart, because I think any of us, when you're getting pummeled so much, and we've had some horrific results, you've seen how many goals, 55 goals or something we've conceded this season. when you're on the receiving end of that. I mean, to be fair against QPR, the first half was really combative. They started the second half much better than us, and when they scored, everyone you could just see the wind go out of them. And I feel like there's that kind of lack of belief as much as lack of attitude. I think the players care. I just don't think they believe anymore. I think whether that's because the managers told them or just the experience of getting battered constantly. But I'm not sure the players believe, and I think that's the biggest lack. Not necessarily ability, not even effort. I think it's the lack of belief that even the substitutes who were warming up when the goal went in, they'd been smiling, they'd been laughing, they'd been looking forward to coming on, and then the goal went in, and they just their body language, they just completely look like they shrunk. They just look like even the subs didn't believe that I can come on, and they've been looking forward to coming on and trying to nick the winner. But they just sort of, it's almost like, we've got to come on and try and rescue the equaliser. I don't know if we're capable of doing that. So that's the one thing. If Muslic has got this charisma, I think that's the one thing he needs to work on the most is the belief, because I think that's what's crippling the players at the minute. Self doubt. I think they are trying. I think they do have ability, but I think if there's something you're going to criticise them for, it's having the self belief that they can go out and change the game.
It's funny you said about the wind coming out of them. It's a good job I was on mute because some wind came out of me during you having that chat, um, which the listener didn't need to know, but now you do. I didn't have this question lined up, but it's mainly because you've chatted to me about it before we move on to Sunderland, which is always my favourite part of every podcast. When they sacked Rooney and Schumacher was available, and you're talking before about how I think Sunderland fans will completely empathise with different managers, and then you get a mishmash of players that just don't fit together. We haven't been there for a while, but we have been there when you're just like David Moyes' signings, Sam Allardyce's signings, whoever, whichever person before him signings, just mismatch. It doesn't work. It kills it. I even more think this now because of what you've said. I felt like Schumacher would have been the obvious choice. Like I don't think he left in a bad way. It didn't seem like he left in a bad way. Like I think on paper you would say that Stoke have probably got more of an opportunity to get into the Premier League than Plymouth. Maybe he felt the same way. I had a Stoke fan on a few weeks ago. I asked him about Schumacher and he was fuming about it. This was before the lad from Norwich, forget his name now, Narcos something.
Elak or something.
That's the
Yeah.
man, Pellick. That's the guy. He's obviously now gone, but he was flabbergasted. Like he said, Schumacher didn't pull up any trees, but he was like you could see that he was all right, and he was beginning to implement stuff. And I watched him on, I'm sure it was Monday Night Football, Tuesday Night Football, and I was quite impressed by him. And I thought, Plymouth's surely going to go back for him. Were you surprised that there was no going back? Because from what I can see, there was no animosity between yourselves and Schumacher. I mean, there'll be some, but like it didn't seem there was much.
I'll try and keep this as brief as possible because it's a little bit complicated. So that it appears that the chairman and he kept quite close. Like they went to Glastonbury, I think, the year after together, and they had a quite close relationship. However, his exit from the club was quite acrimonious. He kind of tapped up some of the players. He wanted to take a few with him. He ended up taking Cundle. That Wolves recalled him and loaned him to Stoke. I think he wanted to take Azaz, but eventually he went to Middlesbrough on a permanent. Obviously, he tapped up the staff and took all the staff with him too. So I think I think they like he and I'm trying to remember that Turner and someone else, Mark Hughes' assistant, they got banned from the premises. I think they sort of went back in at one point to sort of like collect stuff and say goodbye. They're like, no, you've terminated your contract. We've dotted the I's and crossed the T's now. You're not coming back in, sort of thing. So I think like in house it wasn't pleasant. However, I do think that would have been overlooked by both sides. I think Schumacher, if he'd come back, I'm not saying cap in hand and penitent, but sort of said, look, okay, I accept I didn't do things right. I wanted out. I was desperate, didn't do it in the right way. And if the board could maybe have put a little bit behind him. Well, let's put it this way. To be succinct, Schumacher made the last three of the interviews, if not the last two of the interviews. And so he was obviously under, distinct consideration. If anyone's listening to this on audio and wonders why I'm sort of stuttering, it's because Graham's sorting himself out an assortment of pillows for it. He's obviously got a
Got
bad
a bad
back,
back.
and it's been
Yeah. I've got to
I'm
put the
trying to hold my train of thought while watching him put pillow after pillow after pillow behind him like some kind of magic trick. It's like, where are all these pillows going, Ray? I mean, you like stood up and you're now making yourself a throne of pillows. Anyway, um, yeah, he was in the last two, so obviously he was under consideration. Obviously, he wanted the job back. There's all kinds of talk, and there's not this summer the club did really well to like close up all the leaks from within the club. So a lot of the in the knows and the sort of things that come out from social media you can't really believe. But there was talk that there was still a little bit of disagreement. He sort of felt a bit put out that he was being interviewed and wasn't just offered the job when it's the club's fallen off a cliff on the pitch without him, and he sort of felt maybe that it should have just been given to him. Maybe he was a bit arrogant in the interview. He insisted on bringing back some of his staff who'd fallen out with certain people, so they were happy with Schumacher, but not his staff. Now, I don't believe any of this is necessarily nailed on true. I haven't heard any of this from what I'd call a gold standard source. It's just sort of stuff that has got been put around social media. So how much truth to that there is, I don't know. But the chairman did come out and make a very public statement that Steven Schumacher may have been the safer option, but we're a risk-taking club. And on a low budget, we need to take a risk to overachieve. And there's two sides to that. One, I don't think Steven Schumacher necessarily is the safe choice because there's not always a guarantee of lightning striking twice, but he is certainly the safer choice than someone who's never managed in the Championship. That's for sure, because he managed Argyle and Stoke for just over a season. Effectively, he's had more than one full season just over one full season in the Championship as a manager and done pretty darn good, I'd suggest. So the chances are he would do well for you. And I'd argue even that at Stoke and Argyle, given what the managers have done at Argyle since and the managers that Stoke did before and subsequently to his tenures, I'd argue he is overachieving on the budget or the standard that was there before him and after him. I'd say he did better than for Argyle than really he ought to have, and I'd say he did better for Stoke than he ought to have. They probably got a better squad and they've certainly got more money. But in terms of what the managers were getting out of the squad before him and after him, I'd say he did a pretty darn decent job at Stoke, if not better. So I think he wouldn't have been my choice on the emotional level as a supporter, but the pragmatist in me was saying, when we were still had Rooney, we hadn't sacked him yet, and he should have gone like 3 games ago. I'm like, I'd even take Schumacher at this point. I'd even swallow my bias of my green tinted lenses and the way he left, for the sake of the club surviving. And for the manager to come out and say, "Oh, we've got to take risks," is a bit naive, given that. To my mind, given that there's a reason why everything's done the tried and tested way, with a bit of variance by club. There's a reason why sort of certain appointments and certain styles, etc., are used in the Championship. Why certain managers do the merry-go-round, you row it, and that because it works. And when it stops working, then those managers get moved on or phase out. Think about your Allardyce, in the Premier League. He was always getting jobs until that style stopped working, and then he doesn't get those jobs anymore. So there's a reason why people do things a certain way. It might be unimaginative, but you can still use that template and think outside the box and use your data and your risks as taking skills to sort of try and hedge that a little, to try and use that and do it your way. But you don't have to sort of take a massive leap into the unknown. And I kind of feel, I think a lot of fans are getting the impression that the board likes to take these risks. They came off very well with the appointment of Lowe and then Schumacher, his successor. And maybe they sort of drunk their own Kool-Aid a little bit or believed their own hype, and are continuing to make similar high-risk decisions unnecessarily to try and prove that they've still got this magic sauce. And it's almost throwing good money after bad, or it's bad decision after bad decision. Even like they're taking a while to get the staff in for. It's been like 2 weeks now or something to get the staff in. It's just been appointed today as we speak, as we record. Getting some of the staff from Brugge, from Cercle, and to support Muslic. So we've got we've got injuries and we've had more people leave the building than come in the building. We're in a relegation scrap. We've got no players that suit the manager's style. Schumacher's played with a lot of those players. Bali Mumba, Morgan Whittaker were his not his signings. They were the data team's signings. They were I've forgotten his name now. Dickinson. They were Jimmy Dickinson signings, but he agreed to them, nurtured them, brought them on. They're probably our two biggest assets, other than the guys who've come in since the two number tens, Baidu and Al Haj, who again I think would suit Whittaker Schumacher really well, because he got the best out of Finn Azaz in that role. They're very similar players, to a certain degree at least. So I think you're right. Long story short, I know it took me sort of 4 or 5 minutes, but there's a
I
lot.
was going to say, you said I'll keep it brief, and you didn't.
No, uh, I feel like he would have been the safer choice. I don't think he was a nailed on safe choice. He would have been a better choice for continuity, uh, and I think that was probably the better idea. But we'll see if Muslic just turns us around like Roll, or like Cifuentes did for their respective teams last season. We'll all be saying
Mm.
what a clever appointment, and the board have got their magic back. But it just seems the last 18 months of decisions indicate it will be mm, not as positive as that, I think.
Talking of good foreign appointments, we've done one. We've done a
Mm.
one. We've done a one. I don't even know what I mean. I've
A
got to stop.
journalism coming to the fore again.
I have to stop doing the podcasts because I can't speak anymore. We've done really well, is what I'm trying to say. And last time we spoke, I think, we'd won every game we lost against yous. And then people went, we're going to drop off. And it happens every time we lose, the three times we've lost since, which is pretty decent. Like, even if I do say so myself. And I'm enjoying blowing smoke up our own backsides a little bit, but people have expected us to drop off. We haven't. What have you made of Sunderland so far this season?
Yeah, very impressive. And in a way, I kind of keep expecting to drop off as well, purely out of historical precedent. But I think you've been incredibly impressive. The games that I've watched, I was quite surprised you were as bad as you were against us, if that makes sense. Yet you were still probably the better team on the day.
Yeah, we were bad that day. Second half, we were
Exactly.
really poor.
That's what I mean. It's sort of like you still could have beat us, and I know we're down the bottom of the table now, but we weren't doing too bad at the time. We were sort of okay-ish. You battered Burnley the other night. Should have obviously won that. And Burnley have conceded 9 goals all season, which is historically good. So you should have been. I don't know what the XG was, but you should have put at least one of the penalties away. So it should have been a 1-0 win at the very least. I'd have suggested.
It was two something. It was like nearly three.
Yeah, I can. It's going to be something like that. You'll get 1.5 for the two penalties, won't
Yeah.
you? So, um, not that that's the only metric of how you dominate a game and what you create, but just to be simple, to simplify the matters. I think there's sometimes when we talk, we have these weird convoluted situations. One of our clubs, or both of them. I think this is a really straightforward situation. If you're a really good team this year, you don't look like you're dropping off. You look like the real deal. You got players like Job, who, unless he goes, is really starting to be what you thought he could be when we talked the start of last season. He's really sort of like becoming that player that you paid the money for, and everyone's going, "Really? You just bought him because he's Job's brother?" He's really not. He's Job's brother. He is Job. You know what I mean? For the name, and he's proved to be what he's proved his potential. He's reached that. I think you've got the size of squad now that's healthy. That's a lot of it's been together for a while. You're a good team in a good place, and we're a bad team in an awful place. And it's as straightforward as that this time round. It's a pretty easy game to analyse. There's none of this. Oh well, we do this and we do that, and I know you're weak here and that. I feel like you're pretty good everywhere on the pitch, certainly at this level. I think there's few glaring weaknesses that we're going to be able to target and exploit, and we're kind of toothless at the minute and leaking goals for fun. Although we're not quite as porous as we were under Rooney, that sort of stopped. We're still not looking solid. It could have been more on Saturday v QPR, and only the keeper kept it respectable. So I think you've got every chance of. I don't know. I think probably two of the teams above you will likely finish in the automatics. I do think though that you've got a chance if a couple of them decide to stumble. You're definitely going to be the top of the pile for the playoff places if you don't manage to squeak up there. There's no way you're going to drop off. You look quality this season, and then it's the lottery, isn't it? But if you're lucky, then Leeds will stop turning their away form around and start losing again, and Sheffield United will hit another one of those patches where they just look awful. And, it's going to be one of those seasons. It's an interesting season. It's nothing like last season where everyone's running away. It's nice to see there's sort of 4 or 5 teams at the top there. And, I've got a soft spot for you guys. I think it would be nice to see you go up one way or the other.
Predictions?
3-1 to you.
Yeah, I'll take a 3-0, but I feel bad.
No, you're right. I was being 3-1. Believe it or not, that was me being optimistic.
It
We might score.
might, might not.
Dream big.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having you. Thanks for being on.
Professional journalist, ladies and gentlemen.